The lady was a very nice lady. Yeah, she always said hi and everything.
He used to live in the housing for poor people. How could she be killed in her small apartment?
Behind closed doors, the shocking crimes of these deadliest female killers unfold, revealing a dark side of those we least expect. From Ruth Kamande's tragic act of self-defense to Sante Kimes' ruthless conviction, these women's lives took unexpected turns, leading them down a path of crime and controversy. Let's begin.
Portrayal that's been given about us.
The media has so far portrayed us totally like we are not. We're just a mother and son.
Sante Kimes, known as the Dragon Lady, was a notorious figure in the world of crime. Born in 1934, she led a criminal life filled with theft, fraud, arson, and ultimately, murder. Alongside her son, Kenneth Kimes Jr., she was involved in a series of heinous crimes that spanned many years. Their most notorious crime was the murder of Irene Silverman, a socialite from New York City. But their criminal activities didn't stop there. Sante's journey started with minor crimes and escalated to serious offenses. Sante used her charm and manipulation to convince people to assist her in her illegal activities, including her son, Kenneth Jr. Together, they were responsible for several murders. The turning point in their criminal lives came when Kenneth Jr. confessed to multiple murders. After years of dodging authorities, their web of lies began to fall apart. The FBI and other law enforcement agencies connected them to various crimes, including the murder of David Kasdan, another victim whose death was also orchestrated by Sante. Kenneth Jr. eventually reached a plea deal, agreeing to testify against his mother in exchange for a lighter sentence. Their trial for the murder of Silverman revealed the full extent of their crimes, and both were convicted of multiple charges, including murder and conspiracy.
You were sharing the apartment with your mother?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
In 2000, Sante and Kenneth Jr. were sentenced to life imprisonment for the murder of Irene Silverman, as well as other crimes. Sante was sentenced to life without parole, plus 125 years, while Kenneth Jr. received a similar sentence. The trial brought to light not just the murder of Silverman, but also their involvement in other heinous acts like forgery, robbery, and arson. Despite their conviction, Sante continued to deny her involvement, blaming the authorities for framing her. She spent her remaining years in prison, where she died in 2014.
Trust me, it can happen to you. It can happen to your mother. It could happen to your son. We have done nothing wrong. The police overreacted. They are framing us.
The case of Sante and Kenneth Kimes is both chilling and heartbreaking. The sheer cruelty of their actions, particularly the way they manipulated those around them, left a lasting impact on the families of their victims. For many, it's hard to understand how a mother could be so involved in her son's crimes, turning him into a murderer. The story of Sante Kimes is a tragic reminder of how greed and manipulation can destroy lives, and how the pursuit of wealth can lead to the loss of humanity.
Funny, generous, bright red hair, and a personality to match. She really was awfully cute.
Kimes' story reveals how a mother-son duo can do horrific acts. However, our next case takes us to a quiet neighborhood where a shocking murder shattered a community's trust.
From Rentham Street in Dorchester, of Miss Galloway leaving on the morning of the 29th at approximately 9 a.m. with a can of bleach.
In 2017, a quiet neighborhood in Needham, Massachusetts became the backdrop for a horrifying crime. 51-year-old Tammy Galloway was convicted for the murder of her 81-year-old neighbor, Laura Shifrina. The murder occurred in Shifrina's apartment, and the details of the case were both tragic and shocking. On May 28, 2017, Laura Shifrina was last seen alive, going about her daily life as a retired scientist. However, just days later, her daughter discovered her body in her Linden Street apartment. Shifrina had not shown up for an event that evening, raising alarm among her family and friends. As authorities investigated, they discovered that Shifrina's apartment had been ransacked. Items like her car, wallet, cell phone, and jewelry were all gone. It seemed clear that something sinister had taken place.
The jury says there is enough evidence now to move forward with the case against a woman who's accused of killing her elderly neighbor in Needham.
The investigation uncovered a chilling series of clues. Shifrina's 2011 red Ford Fiesta was found abandoned with the keys still in the ignition, but the interior reeked of bleach. Surveillance footage from May 29th showed Galloway and a relative near the car, holding a bottle of bleach, suggesting a desperate attempt to cover up the crime. It was then that the horrifying truth came to light. Galloway had brutally stabbed Shifrina to death in her apartment, likely in a robbery gone wrong. Driven by greed, she stole Shafrina's cash, jewelry, and car, hoping to get her hands on the $3,000 Shafrina had saved for a dental procedure.
Police investigating a death of an 81-year-old woman found inside her apartment with what's being called sharp trauma. Authorities are investigating this as if it is a homicide.
After a tense trial, Tammy Galloway was found guilty of first-degree murder, armed robbery, and larceny. The case culminated in an emotional sentencing hearing where Shafrina's daughter spoke out. Galloway was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
During her sentencing today, Tammy Galloway apologized to the daughter and grandsons who stole money from her and then stole her car.
The case sent shockwaves through the community. The realization that someone from their neighborhood was capable of such a ruthless act was deeply unsettling. The anguish of losing a loved one in such a violent manner extended beyond Shafrina's family, leaving the entire town shaken. As for Galloway, her crimes have ensured that she will spend the rest of her life behind bars, forever marked by her unforgivable actions.
A former scientist.
Everyone in this community has been on the edge of their seat until the police had apprehended whoever this...
So happy. I'm happy now.
The murder of Laura was a senseless act of greed. The next case isn't just about murder. It's about cruelty so extreme, it left an entire state horrified.
Now, the second disappointment was the love letters. The accused person discovered that the disease was still keeping many years after he broke up with the former girlfriends.
In 2015, Ruth Kamande's life changed forever. She was arrested and charged with the murder of her boyfriend, Farid Mohammed. Ruth stabbed Farid 25 times during a violent argument, and the case shocked the entire nation. In 2015, Ruth Kamande and her boyfriend, Farid Mohammed, got into a heated, tragic argument. It all started when Ruth found a small yellow card from the AIDS control program in Farid's room, revealing something he had kept from her. When she asked him about it, the conversation grew tense. Farid became upset and told Ruth that he would rather harm both of them than let anyone know his secret. The situation quickly turned dangerous, and Ruth felt scared for her life. They fought for control in the middle of the struggle, and a kitchen knife fell between them. Desperate to protect herself, Ruth acted in fear and overpowered Farid during the chaos. The tragic incident ended with Farid losing his life. Police quickly launched an investigation, gathering evidence from the crime scene, witness testimonies, and Ruth's account. As they pieced together the events of the violent altercation, Ruth was arrested shortly after. In court, she claimed she had acted in self-defense.
That the accused committed the offense and had acted on purpose. Kamande, who was later crowned Miss Langata Women's Prison, had appealed the sentence.
In 2018, Ruth Kamande's life reached a heartbreaking turning point. She stood before the court, facing the consequences of her actions. Despite sharing her story and explaining that she acted in self-defense during a moment of fear and danger, the judge found her guilty of murder. The courtroom fell silent as the judge announced the sentence: death. Although Ruth gives no reaction at the time of the sentence announcement.
With the clear intention to cause him pain, suffering, and death, and I've taken into account, I want young people to know that it is not cool to kill your boyfriend or girlfriend.
The decision sparked a wave of public debate. Some people felt sympathy for Ruth, believing she had acted to protect herself from harm. Others saw her actions differently and felt justice had been served. The case became widely discussed, with many questioning how the justice system should handle situations involving household conflicts and self-defense. After further review, Ruth's sentence was reduced from death to life imprisonment. Although she would spend the rest of her life behind bars, her story was not over. The experience marked the darkest chapter of her life, but it also became the beginning of a new path, one where she sought to grow, learn, and find a new purpose, even from within prison walls. Ruth's story didn't end there. While serving her sentence at Community Maximum Prison, she found a new path. She enrolled in law studies through a program by Justice Defenders, an organization that helps inmates and communities gain legal knowledge. In 2024, Ruth graduated with a law degree from the University of London. She shared her achievement with other inmates and wardens during a special ceremony, saying, "We're not only here to celebrate graduates, but people who have transformed and proved that something good can come out of prisons." The resolution of Ruth's story is bittersweet. She remains behind bars, serving a life sentence. She now uses her education to help fellow inmates navigate the justice system. Ruth has also appealed her case to the Supreme Court, hoping for a chance to tell her side of the story again, this time with the knowledge of the law on her side. Her journey brings a mix of emotions, sadness for a life lost, but also hope that even in darkness, people can find redemption and a new purpose. Ruth's tragic yet complex case left the world in turmoil. Our next case reveals how someone can be labeled a serial killer, and spend years fighting to prove their innocence.
In corso, alla luce anche delle motivazioni della Suprema Corte di Cassazione, e quindi esprimiamo una soddisfazione che è di tipo professionale processuale.
Daniela Poggiali was an Italian nurse accused of killing 38 of her patients. The case stirred a lot of controversy and shocked many. However, in 2021, after a thorough reanalysis of the hospital's mortality data, it was found that the statistics used to charge her were flawed. This led to Daniela's acquittal and eventual freedom. Daniela's life took a drastic turn when the prosecution relied heavily on hospital mortality data and the controversial photo, interpreting it as evidence of Daniela's guilt. However, after her conviction, doubts began to surface regarding the validity of the data used to support the charges against her. The investigations, once thorough, failed to account for certain inconsistencies in the statistics, raising questions about whether the case against Daniela had been built on flawed assumptions. The charges were severe, and as a result, Daniela was disbarred and spent over 1,000 days in prison. One of the key points of contention was a photo she took with a 102-year-old patient who passed away, which some interpreted as suspicious. The accusations painted Daniela as a serial killer, and she was thrown into a lengthy and painful legal battle. She was sentenced to life imprisonment after being found guilty of their murders. However, she showed no remorse because somewhere she knew she was not a killer.
È stata quindi accolta la richiesta del procuratore generale di annullare con rinvio l'ultima sentenza.
After spending over 3 long years behind bars, Daniela's life took a surprising turn. Her case, which had shocked many, was revisited. It all started with a deep dive into the hospital mortality data. Experts reanalyzed the numbers, and what they discovered were hidden factors that challenged the original conclusion about Daniela's involvement in the deaths of her patients. The new evidence led to doubt about the fairness of the charges against her.
Difficult patients, either because the relatives were demanding or because it was difficult to take care of the patient.
In January 2023, the Supreme Court made a powerful decision. They overturned the previous verdict, declaring Daniela innocent. This moment was nothing short of a miracle for her. After years of being wrongly accused, Daniela was finally free. Her life, which had been turned upside down, was now being set right.
Prosecutors are investigating whether Poggiali could be responsible for the deaths of 38 people.
It was a second chance, a chance to rebuild everything she had lost. Daniela could finally return to her family, and she began dreaming of the future she thought she might never have. Despite the immense pain and confusion she had endured, she remained confident in her skills as a nurse. With her name cleared, she hoped to go back to her nursing career, where she had once felt a sense of purpose. Daniela's story is one of resilience and hope. After enduring years of hardship, she now looks forward to rebuilding her life and career. The emotional toll of being wrongly accused and imprisoned is clear, but Daniela's determination to regain her freedom and continue her work as a nurse shows her strength and optimism for the future. Daniela Poggiali spent years behind bars for crimes she didn't commit, but the next case reveals the darkest depths of human cruelty.
She was so skinny that she didn't have anything on her. She was just skinny, and she just looked.
Angela Darlene McAnulty's heartbreaking story began in 2009 when her 15-year-old daughter, Jeanette Maples, was discovered unresponsive in their Eugene, Oregon home. Jeanette was severely lean and dehydrated, with multiple injuries. The emergency room physician who treated her described it as one of the most serious cases of neglect they had ever encountered. In 2011, Angela was convicted of the unimaginable crime of killing her 15-year-old daughter, Jeanette. She had suffered severe mistreatment, and the discovery of her lifeless body left the community in shock. Angela's guilty plea to aggravated murder led her to being sentenced to death, a decision that deeply affected everyone involved.
Says he hopes a new trial will end with McAnulty spending the rest of her life in prison.
Authorities rushed to the Eugene, Oregon home, but sadly, 15-year-old Jeanette was already gone. Medical examinations revealed that she had suffered from severe neglect and with clear signs of mistreatment. Investigators quickly focused on her mother, Angela, who was arrested and charged with aggravated murder. In 2011, Angela admitted to the crime, pleading guilty and accepting her punishment without a trial. Over the years, however, the case took unexpected turns. Angela's legal team argued that her original attorneys had not represented her well, and this led to a series of appeals. As time passed, Oregon's legal system changed. In 2019, new laws were passed that reduced the penalties for certain crimes, including child murders involving extreme harm. This change in legislation opened the door for a reconsideration of Angela's sentence. After years of legal battles and emotional struggles, a new agreement was reached. Instead of staying on death row, Angela was resentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. the maximum sentence allowed under the new laws. As the verdict was read, she started crying.
Judge Pratt says her defense team was rushed and unprepared when they took up McNulty's case.
Though justice was served, the pain of Jeanette's tragic story remains a heartbreaking reminder of the horrors a child can face and the difficult journey families go through to find justice. Angela McAnulty, once the only woman on death row in the state, now faced a life sentence instead. Though she would never be released from prison, it did not erase the anguish of the crime she committed or the suffering it caused those who loved her daughter, Jeanette. Additionally, Angela's former husband, Richard McAnulty, was also involved in the tragic murder by mistreatment. He too was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. While this legal resolution brought a sense of justice, it couldn't undo the suffering Jeanette endured. In July 2021, Angela's sentence was re-examined, leading to a significant change. Her death sentence was cancelled, and she was resentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. This was the harshest penalty allowed under a new Oregon law addressing cases of extreme mistreatment. With both the legal system and legislature taking action, her new sentence was finalized, ensuring she would spend the rest of her life in prison with no chance of release. This case leaves a sense of deep sadness and anger, not only because of the extreme cruelty suffered by Jeanette, but also because of the long and painful journey her family had to endure for justice. While Angela McAnulty's sentence was altered, it doesn't change the tragic reality of a child lost in such a devastating way. The emotional toll of this case will forever affect those who knew Jeanette and all who followed the details of her story.
It's a painful, tragic memory, and child abuse and neglect in all of its forms continues to happen.
Up next, Reginald Lofton, a teenager whose actions turned a robbery into a brutal murder. What led to this deadly encounter, and how did the justice system respond?
We, the jury, found the defendant in the second count, felony murder, guilty. We, the jury, found the defendant in the third count, felony murder, guilty.
On March 1st, 2016, 28-year-old Shane Varnador, hardworking and kind, did his usual night shift delivering pizzas for Papa John's, dreaming of designing video games. But that night, he never made it home. Authorities later uncovered that Shane was lured to an apartment complex in Gwinnett County, Georgia, by two teens, Reginald Lofton and Jermaine Young, who intended to rob him. Upon Shane's arrival, he was shot and killed. Police couldn't determine which of the teens pulled the trigger, but under Georgia law, aid in a crime resulting in death holds equal responsibility with the shooter. At 14, Lofton played a crucial role by providing the phone used for the fake order. After Shane was killed, Lofton took the pizza back to his apartment as if nothing had happened.
During the lick, the pizza man flinched on him and the gun went off and he shot him.
Yes.
And I said, Reginald, did you hear that gunshot? He said, no, I had my headphones on.
Lofton was arrested and tried for Shane's murder. The courtroom was filled with emotion as the prosecution narrated how a man's life was taken over something as trivial as a pizza. Shane's family members shared their pain. His mother was too emotional to read her statement. His sister described how her young daughter didn't understand death, asking repeatedly when she would see her uncle again. The judge showed no sympathy for Lofton and before sentencing stated, "I wish I could give you more time than I can because I consider you a cold-blooded killer. I hope you never leave prison." But because of a recent U.S. Supreme Court ruling, minors convicted of murder couldn't be sentenced to life without parole. It was considered cruel and unusual punishment. Lofton was given life in prison with the possibility of parole. He would have to serve 30 years before becoming eligible, meaning he wouldn't even have a chance at release until he was 45 years old. As the verdict was read, tears streamed from the defendant's eyes.
Now, a teen that young, 14 at the time of the crime, to be sentenced to life without parole.
Before sentencing, Lofton's sister pleaded for clemency, saying, "Instead of throwing him under the jail cell, give him a second chance."
That my brother do deserve a second chance at life instead of throwing him under the jail cell.
Lofton faced numerous struggles growing up. After losing his mother, his father was deemed unfit to care for him, leaving him under his sister's care. He had already encountered legal troubles and experienced too much violence for his young age. When it was his turn to speak, Lofton initially refused. However, before the judge made the final decision, he hesitantly said, "I just want to say I'm sorry for your loss, but I did not kill your son. I wasn't the shooter. That's it, Judge." Regardless of whether Lofton pulled the trigger, the fact remained. Shane Varnador was gone. A hardworking man, a loving son, and a devoted brother had lost his life over something senseless. His family was left with heartbreak that would never fully heal.
And I can't imagine what my life's going to be like. I'm sorry.
Lofton was given a second chance with parole in his sentence, yet Shane never had that opportunity. His family continues to grieve a life that could have been, all because of a single pizza delivery call that went terribly wrong. A young man lost his life over a pizza delivery. The next case shows how a trip to the mall turned into a nightmare when a petty argument spiraled into deadly violence.
I know and understand what I did was wrong, but I suffer full responsibility for my actions. I was saying I'm sorry, but saying I'm sorry is not only what I've done.
Just 2 days before Christmas in 2022, a time when families are engrossed in holiday preparations, a tragic event left one family forever altered. That evening, inside the Nordstrom store at the Mall of America, 19-year-old Jonte Hudson lost his life in an act of cruel violence. An argument erupted between two groups of young men within the mall, quickly escalating into deadly violence. During the fight, Jonte was tackled to the ground. At that moment, 19-year-old Tayshawn Adams Wright and his accomplice, Lavon Longstreet, drew firearms and shot Jonte multiple times at point-blank range. A woman shopping with her daughter also sustained injuries from a stray bullet, causing the mall to go into lockdown as shoppers fled in terror. Upon officers' arrival, Jonte was found with fatal gunshot wounds on the floor. Despite attempts to save him, he did not survive. Surveillance footage led investigators to identify the suspects. Following an intense manhunt, Adams Wright and Longstreet were arrested, each charged with second-degree murder and second-degree assault. Months passed until Adams Wright surprised everyone in court by openly admitting to killing Jonte. When questioned by his lawyer on the circumstances of the shooting, he responded, yes, but afterward expressed remorse for his actions.
I want to apologize for bringing pain and suffering to the victim family because of the lady who got shot.
Subsequently, the judge sentenced Adams Wright to 30 years in prison. Longstreet's trial is still pending, though he faces a similar outcome.
My head around this. No one who hasn't gone through what you're going through can. It's 30 years and 7 months. No.
For Jonte's mother, Lynn, no sentence could ever bring her son back. She expressed her heartbreak, saying, his parents will still have him. They can visit him, write to him, talk to him, but my son is gone forever. Her sister also mentioned in an interview, everybody loves him. He was a people person. She described Jonte as a loving and vibrant young man whose life was stolen far too soon.
He was funny, sometimes quiet. Like, everybody loved him. He was a people person. Bullet wound or something. I didn't think that nothing too serious about it.
An innocent mall visit ended in tragedy, altering a family's destiny. The senseless act of violence taking Jonte's life inflicted a deep wound on his family and their surrounding community. Although seeking justice, Jonte's mother knows that no verdict will suffice in replacing her son. Jonte's murder was a brutal act of senseless violence. The next case shows how a young mind can commit a horrific act.
You are charged with 1 count of manslaughter. It is a second-degree felony. It is punishable by up to 15 years Florida State Prison. Do you understand that?
That's it.
On May 23, 2024, in Lauderdale Lakes, Florida, the shocking crime committed by 14-year-old Sofia Koval left a family and community reeling. After the beating death of her 79-year-old grandmother, Maria Koval, everyone struggled to comprehend how such horror emerged within a family. The day of Maria's tragic death, an emergency call led authorities to the Koval residence, where they discovered Maria unresponsive, with no hope of revival. Their investigation soon concluded that the perpetrator was her own granddaughter, Sofia. Family members struggled to understand how Sofia, once the bright and gentle girl of their family, could have done this. At just 14 years old, Sofia was taken into custody and placed in juvenile detention. At first, it seemed like her case would be handled in the juvenile system, but prosecutors soon had a different plan. On October 1st, prosecutors made a bold decision. Sofia would be charged as an adult with manslaughter. She was transferred from juvenile detention to the Broward County Jail and placed in protective custody. The courtroom was tense as a judge ruled that there was enough evidence to proceed with the case. Sofia prays that the decision will be in her favor, but the charge of manslaughter carries serious consequences.
14-year-old Sofia Koval openly prayed in court as she waited for her case to be called.
If convicted as an adult, Sophia could face up to 15 years in prison. There was also another complication. Sophia was not a U.S. citizen. If convicted, she could face deportation after serving her sentence. A Broward State Attorney, Harold F. Pryor, and a team of senior prosecutors carefully reviewed the case. However, because of her young age, there was a possibility that she could be sentenced under juvenile sanctions. In that case, she would serve a maximum of 3 years in detention and could be supervised until she turned 21.
On May 23, 2024, Sofia Koval did beat Yevgenia Koval about her head and body, resulting in multiple injuries. And during that beating episode,
After considering all the facts and evidence, they decided that the adult court was the right place for Sophia's trial. Because of the heinous nature of the crime, and after considering everything presented by the defense so far, I believe it is appropriate that this case should be handled in adult court, Pryor stated. While prosecutors wanted justice for Maria Koval, they also acknowledged that Sophia was still a child. They promised to work with her attorneys to find a resolution that balanced accountability with understanding her age and circumstances.
She is seen praying and crossing herself during that hearing. And her case was back in court today as the state is weighing whether to charge her as an adult.
The case left a family shattered. A grandmother lost her life, and a teenage girl now faced the consequences of a terrible act. The community struggled to understand how such violence could happen between loved ones. Judge Elizabeth Scherer also said it's a difficult decision.
Hold a 14-year-old in secure detention is very, very difficult under the law. Even when juveniles commit, first-degree felonies, robbery, kidnapping.
Sophia's case shows that even family ties can be broken by violence. However, the next case reveals a sinister plot that would take the life of a promising college student.
These are 14 and a 13-year-old boy. We should all remember that.
Family, including Tessa Major's father, silently left court.
On a cold evening in December 2019, Tessa Majors, an 18-year-old Barnard College freshman, strolled near Morningside Park, Manhattan, harboring dreams and ambition. With life and opportunity in her hands, the few minutes ahead would, unfortunately, see them extinguished. Shortly before 7 p.m. on December 11th, 3 teenagers came into the park with one intention: to rob someone. Past deeds lay behind, but tonight, everything would change. They observed Tessa engrossed in her phone, making her their target. As Rashawn Weaver seized her from behind, Luciano Lewis restrained her, searching her pockets. But Tessa wasn't going to give up easily. She fought back, even biting one of the attackers on the finger. That's when everything changed. Enraged, Weaver pulled out a knife and stabbed Tessa multiple times. One of the wounds pierced her heart. Even after being attacked, Tessa struggled to get away. She managed to climb up a flight of stairs near the park entrance, desperately trying to find help. At the top of the stairs, a security guard found her collapsed and bleeding. She was rushed to the hospital, but it was too late. Tessa Majors was gone. The very next day, police arrested a 13-year-old boy who matched the description of one of the attackers. He was wearing clothes and sneakers similar to those seen in surveillance footage. During questioning, he confessed that he and his friends had planned the robbery, but claimed he wasn't the one who stabbed Tessa. As police continued their investigation, they struggled to find the other suspects. One of them, Rashawn Weaver, had gone into hiding, with family members reportedly helping him avoid arrest. It took 2 weeks before the police finally caught him.
The other 2 suspects will be tried in adult court. Their trials on murder and robbery charges are pending.
Once all 3 suspects were in custody, the full details of the crime came to light. Prosecutors revealed that the attack wasn't just a random robbery gone wrong. It was intentional, cruel, and premeditated. The youngest of the attackers, who was just 13 at the time, pleaded guilty to first-degree robbery. Because of his age, he was sentenced to only 18 months in a juvenile detention center.
Anything on behalf of your son?
Weaver's mother had no comments about her son, turning her head away. Neither did Lewis's parents.
Luciano Lewis, who helped restrain Tessa, pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and first-degree robbery. He was sentenced to 9 years to life in prison, yet he shows no remorse for his actions.
The student was stabbed to death, was sentenced today, 9 years to life in prison.
He was one of 3 middle school students.
The final suspect, Rashawn Weaver, the one who held the knife, admitted to stabbing Tessa. He pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to 14 years to life in prison. The tragic murder of Tessa Majors shook the entire city. She was young, talented, and full of life. Her family and friends were devastated. left to grieve a life taken too soon. While her killers were caught and sentenced, no punishment could ever bring Tessa back. It was a heartbreaking reminder of how senseless violence can destroy lives. Tessa Major's potential, curtailed by unforgiving fate, demanded her aspirations fall silent. Her profile symbolized stolen chance, submerged beneath malevolence, an unresolved tragedy, preserving undue loss. Tessa's case shows how teens had planned their crime from the very start. The next case shows how manipulation can lead to devastating consequences.
Did you hear something?
Yes, he was screaming bloody murder.
Okay. And was he actually saying the words bloody murder, or are you just using that as a phrase?
I was just using that as a...
On a quiet night in 2014, the Sikorsky family in Plymouth Township, Michigan, faced a nightmare they could never have imagined. Their adopted daughter, 15-year-old Roxana Sikorsky, had been plotting something unthinkable, an attack on her family. Roxana wasn't acting alone. Her then-boyfriend, Michael Rivera, who was older than her, had been guiding her every move from outside the house. He sent her messages, giving her step-by-step instructions. That night, with a knife in hand, Roxana entered her 12-year-old brother's room and stabbed him. She then attempted to attack her younger sister before fleeing the house and running away with Rivera. Thankfully, her brother survived, and authorities quickly apprehended Roxana and Rivera. Upon investigation, it was discovered that Roxana and Rivera intended to kill her family and escape together. Investigations revealed that Rivera had been directing Sikorsky through text messages, providing explicit instructions and even anatomical diagrams to ensure the lethality of the attacks. As the case went to court, Roxana pleaded guilty to assault with intent to murder. The trial was heartbreaking for her family, particularly her adoptive mother, Laureen Sikorsky. Instead of anger, Laureen begged for mercy, believing Roxana had been manipulated by Rivera into making terrible choices.
Roxy was misled and used by an older adult. However, nothing will benefit this child by sending her to jail.
She said in court, she will miss her high school prom, her graduation, her friends, and her family. She is in desperate need of continued psychological help.
Roxana is now 17 years old. She will miss her high school prom, her graduation, her friends, and her family. She is in desperate need of continued psychological help.
Roxana also spoke in court, expressing deep regret for her actions. She apologized to her family, saying she was sorry for not being the daughter they had hoped for, and promised to work on becoming a better person.
I would like to apologize to my family for not being the daughter they wished I would be. I promise that I will get better, no matter what happens.
Despite her mother's plea, the judge sentenced Roxana to 10 to 20 years in prison. She received credit for the 528 days she had already spent in custody and would undergo extensive psychiatric treatment while serving her time. Meanwhile, Michael Rivera, the man responsible for influencing Roxana's actions, was sentenced to life in prison for his role in the attack. The case left the Sikorsky family shattered. A mother lost the daughter she had adopted and loved, while two siblings had to recover from both psychological and emotional wounds. While Roxana's mother holds hope for her daughter's future, the scars of that night remain.
It is perfect. She has psychological damage from the orphanage in Poland and then in her biological family. She was a good student, good girl, good friends. It's just a confluence of all bad events.
Some crimes are driven by anger, greed, or hatred. However, in this case, it was the influence of an older boyfriend and a young girl's misguided choices that led to a horrific nightmare. The chilling stories of these deadly women will leave you questioning the darkest corners of human nature, and their courtroom reactions reveal the haunting consequences of their actions. However, there's more to uncover. In our next video on screen, we take you even deeper into these shocking cases and the life sentences that stunned the world.